Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham dhammang sangham namasami. Good morning and welcome to this Sunday afternoon sutta study program with the Dhammadarine Monastery here in California. Today I have decided to have a program in honor of the full enlightenment of the Buddha's disciple Sariputta, which was said to take place at the Magha full moon. We just had that full moon a few days ago. So Sariputta would be enjoying his first 3 or 4 days of his state as a fully enlightened arahant. Sariputta obtained his enlightenment, it's said in the commentary, while he was listening to a particular sutta. The sutta was not being offered to him, it was being given to his cousin. And so in that way, he's the one who got a delicious meal from a table that was set for somebody else. Before reading the sutta, I'd like to give a little bit of background. Sariputta was previously a student of another teacher, and that teacher was Sanjaya Belatiputta, who was known as a skeptic, or somebody calls an irregular, because he didn't want to give a definite answer about anything at all. I've always found it somewhat confusing what it means to be what he was expounding. And I got a bit of a helpful tip when I looked up skepticism in on the internet computer, and it took me to an encyclopedia of philosophy, which explained it in terms of in the ancient days, there was a concern about limitations about what a person is able to know. And some idea about what cases we should suspend judgment about what we know and what's just an illusion, just a delusion. One is a claim that we're not able to know anything. Actually, you could say this, explaining in terms of science. So if I look at this screen and if I can see your faces, it's claimed that the brain has got some kind of hypothesis put up from memory about who you are, and it comes to put like a mental image of you, and then through some kind of process through the senses, I'm comparing what is coming in through my eye sense gate of vision, and saying, well, yeah, it fits, it looks just like you, so it must be you. And so then having came to the conclusion that it's you, then what I experience is not you. And I'm not even experiencing the little image of you which is on the screen of this computer, but instead I'm experiencing some kind of a event that's happening inside the brain. And so in that way, I never really get to know anything. All I ever experience is different waves and patterns that are happening inside the brain. So that's kind of an extreme skepticism. And then the other kind of skepticism is saying that one has to be agnostic about whether you know anything or not. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. The doctrine of Sanjaya is given in a different sutta than the one we're looking at today. It's in the long discourses in Samanyapala Sutta, the fruits of regularship. The king had visited different other philosophers when he was trying to get the answers to his questions. And he said, if you were to ask whether there is another world, meaning after death, is there another existence? His Sanjaya's answer, if I believed that to be the case, I would say so, but I don't say it's like this. I don't say it's like that. I don't say it's otherwise. I don't say it's not so, and I don't deny it's not so. Suppose you ask me whether there's no other world. I give the same answer. I don't say it's this, I don't say it's that, I don't say it's otherwise, I don't say it's not this, I don't deny that it's this, I don't deny that it's not so. So you say, well, is there both another world and also not another world? Same answer. Is there neither another world or not another world? Are there beings born spontaneously, beings not born spontaneously, and so on? Is there a fruit and a result of good and bad deeds? They don't know, or they refuse to answer. And then about the questions about the Tathagata, whether he exists or not after the death. This is severely criticized in suttas, this kind of flip-flopping. They called him irregulars. And we can see that you might think an intelligent person like the wanderer Sariputta would become dissatisfied with that teaching because it wasn't leading him to the end of suffering or not to anything approaching the end of suffering. And so he was seeking for a different teacher, someone who knew the way. And then there's a famous case that's given in the, actually it's in the Vinaya, in the Mahakanda. It tells the story of how Sariputta met one of the Buddha's disciples named Asaji. And he saw that Asaji had a very calm, wonderful presence and a bright complexion. And he felt, oh, this recluse must have it, must really have something. And so then he followed him until after the alms round, after he had settled for the afternoon abiding. And then Sariputta approached very politely, and he inquired, who is your teacher? And learned that it was Gautama, the Buddha. And he said, what is his doctrine? And Asaji gave this teaching. He said, of causally arisen things, the Buddha has declared their cause. And upon hearing that sentence, Sariputta obtained the stream entry path, according to the commentaries. And then Asaji continued, as well as their ending. This is the teaching of the great ascetic. And hearing the second half of the verse, Sariputta obtained the fruit of stream entry. He experienced the stainless vision of truth and said, anything that has a beginning has an end. It's just showing us how tremendously central the Buddha's insight into dependent arising is. The Four Noble Truths can be derived from dependent arising. The Dīghanakha, or the three marks of existence, impermanence, suffering, and not self, can be derived from dependent arising. And I'm going to give you the punchline. At the end of the sutta that you see today, the student Dīghanakha is giving a skeptical philosophy which is rebutted by the Buddha. And the Buddha analyzes this philosophy and other kinds of views in terms of where they're coming from, what kinds of underlying tendencies will incline a person to fall into this kind of a view. And then he analyzes them in terms of what they're leading to, that a person grasping this kind of view is going to get into quarrels and conflicts. So the assessment of the view is not on some kind of a sort of absolute, like, is this real? Is it really, really real? Really, but it's a pragmatic assessment. Is it coming, where it's coming from and what it's leading to? That's how we assess the view. So I guess we can read the sutta now. Okay, try again. Here we go. Dīghanakha. At one time, the Buddha was staying near Rajgha, on the Vulture's Peak mountain, in the Boar's Cave. Then the wanderer Dīghanakha went up to the Buddha and exchanged greetings with him. When the greeting and polite conversation were over, he stood to one side and said his speech. So we hear from the commentary that Dīghanakha was Sariputta's relative, I think maybe his nephew. And he was also a student of Sanjaya the skeptic, and was feeling unhappy or disappointed that Sariputta had left the discipleship with Sanjaya and gone over to the Buddha. And so because of that, he wanted to go over and test the Buddha, challenge him. So he said, "Worthy Gautama," that's Bo Gautama, that's not like a very polite way of speaking. That's how you speak to your equal, but it's not how you speak to somebody who's above you. Brother Gautama, this is my doctrine and view. Nothing is acceptable to me. Sabame nakamati. I reject everything. So that's the skeptical view. And then the Buddha comes up with the classic rebuttal. This is this very same rebuttal. If you open up the online internet encyclopedia of philosophy, it will give you this exact rebuttal to the skeptic. So, this view of yours, Agivesana, that's his clan name, addressing him by his clan name. This view of yours, is that acceptable to you? So, as a skeptic, he doesn't accept anything, but then he's caught because he's got a view and he's accepting that view, because the mind is not able to exist in a stable way without accepting any knowledge whatsoever. And so then Agivesana tries to dodge and wiggle out of it. He said, if I were to accept this view, were the Gautama, it would make no difference. It would make no difference. Well, Agivesana, there are many more in the world who say, it would make no difference, it would make no difference. But they don't give up that view, and they grasp another view. But there are scant few in the world who say, it would make no difference, it would make no difference, and they give up that view by not grasping another view. Something else about Venerable Sariputta. I like Sariputta very much. He was famous for being able to explain the teachings of the Buddha. He could give clear, detailed explanations of something that the Buddha had mentioned very briefly. And he was a skillful teacher. There's another sutta on right view in the middle-length discourses. I think it's number 9, maybe, where Sariputta explains what right view is in many different ways. He goes, well, you could explain it this way, you could explain it this way, and he gives many different ways of thinking, all of which would fall within the purview of right view. And then elsewhere, there's another sutta that's famous in the long discourses. It's called Sangiti Sutta, which is called reciting together. And that's where the monks are chanting some of the teachings of the Buddha in terms of lists. Like, these are the ones, these are the twos, these are the threes, these are the fours. So they're chanting different short, like mnemonics, to memorize the main key points of the Buddha's teaching in terms of these numerical lists. And it's thought that Sariputta perhaps might have invented this. Well, he didn't invent the technique of using a numerical list, but he developed the lessons and teachings that were given by the Buddha into numerical lists for the sake of helping the disciples to be able to remember them accurately. You can see how, if you didn't have a numbered list, if I supposed I asked Brahmavara about the path, what's the path that the Buddha taught? And if she didn't have a number, she might remember 6 of them. But if you know there's supposed to be 8, then you would make the effort and remember the last 2 so that you remember the complete list. There's another area of explanation that is associated with Sariputta, and that is the last book in the Pali canon, meaning the last book that was accepted as a canonical book. This is called in English the Path of Discrimination. In Pali it's called the Patisampitamagga. And it's sort of an outline of the Buddha's teaching, but it's a very lovable, it's a really lovable text to me, because compared with the Abhidhammas that were created by the various schools, at least the Patisambhidhamagga was finalized around the time of the Second Council, so it's earlier than the regular Abhidhamma. It's sort of like an Abhidhamma-like approach. It's given in terms of like an outline of the teaching, but it's a really useful outline. If you want an outline, if you want to organize your studies into an outline, there's some really great stuff there, and I feel glad to have found some monks who appreciate this teaching and are kind of like showing the way about ways to work with that particular book. So anyway, Sariputta is a teacher. He's a philosopher. He's got a well-organized mind, and he's really interested in right view. So this other young monk, Dīghanakha, is clinging to his wrong views. And so this sutta is sort of like the eye-opening sutta about how to tell the difference between wrong view and right view, which is a very significant accomplishment that is part of the path to full awakening. As if you don't know the difference, then you could take a wrong turn. I'll call on you, Aya. Do you have anything to help with what I said that was too confusing so far?
It all made great sense, Aya. Wonderful.
Okay. So now the Buddha is saying, there are some ascetics and Brahmin who have this doctrine in view. Everything is acceptable to me. And there's some who have the view, nothing is acceptable to me. And some who have this doctrine in view, some things are acceptable and some things are not. You could say that in all these cases, it's kind of like a doctrinaire approach. Nothing is acceptable, meaning you don't believe anything, you're a skeptic. And then everything is acceptable. What does that mean? I think it could be somebody who's like a naive realism. This is called naive realism, like everything you experience, you believe it. Even though what you're experiencing inside your head is sometimes your experiences are giving a good picture, and sometimes what you experience is not giving a good picture. Like the group of blind men and the elephant, one man experiences a wall, the other one experiences the trunk of a tree, and the other one grabs the tail and experiences a rope. And so like that, someone who has the doctrine, everything is acceptable to me, like whatever they experience, they think that that's the whole thing. To my understanding, the Buddha's approach on this question is going to be a kind of a pragmatic middle way between skepticism and dogmatism, that he believes that what one experiences can be interrogated or questioned using logic, and can also be tested in terms of what one has learned from the wise, what one has learned from other people as far as what's real and what's not real. And then if something is given as a dogma, like someone who supposedly is wise and they give some dogma, that it shouldn't only be accepted just because you have what you think is a wise person telling you something and you apply your logic to it. You also have to apply it to your direct experience. So you've got to have putting these three factors together: your own logical thinking, your direct experience, and the opinions are what one can learn from the wise. And to me, this is like so brilliant to acknowledge that what we were able to know, it's not just that we were born in a complete wilderness facing this great natural world, and we're like a little, like a wolf child who was raised by animals, who never met a human, and who never learned any language, and they're just facing with the blank slate of what's out there in nature, and then coming to discover and gain knowledge that way. Instead, we're born into a human society, and we, gaze into the eyes of mother and father, and we see their recognition for us, and those kind of communications and those kind of learnings, and everything that we get along the culture is essential, an essential part of how we might understand what's true and what's not true, what we understand what's real or what's not real. So that which is like allowed to be real by society is an important factor. We only can hope that the society into which we are swimming is not a society of wicked fools feeding us propaganda. But we hope that we're in a society of the virtuous, and that we have a chance to encounter some who have wakened up, who are able to see things as they really are, and to communicate from a different perspective of wisdom. I'm going to pause again. What do you think? Any questions about this? How do you know what's real? Is there anything apart from those 3 points? I see a question. Would I put a link in the chat regarding his pre-Abhidhamma? Yes, I will. I don't know if I can do a link, but I can spell it. P-A-T-I-S-A-M-B-H-I-D-H-A-M-A-G-G-A. Patisambhidhamagga. I think that's it. How do you know what's real? Whoever has an answer, put your hand up and tell me. Hi, Brahmavara.
Well, I'm really taking in this eel wriggling approach, and what's the difference between, like in Kalama Sutta, where the Buddha was advising people not to believe anything, that they're taught or that he says or that they've learned from their culture or that's written in the scriptures and so on, not to believe anything. And so what's the difference? And then there are other places frequently where the Buddha says, you foolish person, if you don't believe in mother and father and karma and higher beings and so forth. So there are certain things that one is foolish if one doesn't believe, and then there's the exhortation not to believe anything. So for me, it's like quite interesting. mixture of teachings, and taking in that the Buddha's really pointing so often to our experience as our guide. So not to believe anything unless we can know it for ourselves through our own experience, through our own testing, of the truth. And there's one thing you said, and I was feeling like, oh, I'm not so sure about this, which is that we can learn from our cultures and backgrounds and take that as true and virtuous. And I've actually more or less come to the conclusion that it's other than that. That actually it's very how to say, this path of practice really is almost like pointing to the conventional ways of thinking as not correct. And the stream of worldly cares and concerns is almost flowing in the opposite direction to the values of the path. And so I sort of feel, I mean, that's quite, challenging for us to wade through all of that, but our own experience, in answer to what you were asking, seems to me to be the gold standard.
Our own experience, but also learning from the wise. So when a person was so disappointed by all the conventional wisdom that they got from ordinary people who don't understand anything, and then disenchanted with all of the blind alleys that people have gone down and trying to understand, and then finally they meet a Sama Sambuddha, and there's like, oh. And I think many people who are here have said that you went for years in your life thinking there must be something, and then it came a time when you heard about the Four Noble Truths, and it said, oh, finally I found a home. This is a way of looking at it that is going to be productive for me. So you might not have thought it up all by yourself, but by hearing from the wise in combination with your direct experience, but also including applying logic to interrogate what one experiences is also something that the Buddha does. He sets the example of doing that. I'm going to call on Maureen.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm thinking of the Kalama Sutta.
Yes.
As where they were quizzing the Buddha, who do we believe? All these people come through and pre-chatters and everything, and he said, "Well, I'll give you my teachings, but you must see if they work for you." He actually challenged them to do that, and if anything that's helpful, carry on with that. If it isn't helpful, then maybe you've got to let go of those other ideas. So
yes.
I do remember that one. Yeah.
Yes. So those are the views that are worth keeping, the ones that help us. Yeah. Right. Thank you. Okay. I'm going to have a comment here from Leo here in the room.
I don't have like a clear stream of thought going on here, but as you're talking about these things, it occurs to me to make a distinction between ultimate truth and belief. We can know something that is beyond belief, and as practitioners, there's an aim and a goal for something that is more lasting than everyday phenomena that like the common reality that we experience. And it occurs to me that the beliefs and the thought forms that we have are how we create our shared realities. So in addition to those three things you were thinking about, as you were talking about it, I was thinking it's it's really important in Sangha for us to just do reality checks with each other. You know, we spend so much time in our practices, in our own individual worlds, creating these realities or views or belief systems. And when we're in Sangha, we have the opportunity to just do reality checks with each other.
I'm not going to comment on every single comment, but yes, it's true. I'm going to call on Corina.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really just trying to clarify my mind a little bit, see if I understand. Is this a little bit more about figuring out the right sources where to get information, or more about how how we get information? I know it might seem like the same thing, but like just a distortion of perception. I'm thinking about trusting my own experience. It's really hard to sometimes to know if when it gets beyond feeling, uh, to trust my perceptions. And when you ask that question, how do we know things? Was that the question? But besides, the obvious senses, lately I've been fascinated a little bit with, sometimes I just know things in a magical, intuitive way. And it's just really neat. Like this just happened yesterday. I told my Siri thing to play some music, a playlist, and it's a random music. But then I just I was like, oh, I wonder what song is gonna. This happened like within a second. I'm like, oh, I wonder what song is gonna play next first. And I'm like, oh, it's gonna be this song, and that's the song it was. And I sometimes if I can focus like that, then sometimes I know things in that way. So I don't know what that is.
I think we're more interested, not really just what to believe, but in how we can know. I mean, this is the sort of the aspect of right view that's the most powerful. And in terms of these different ways of knowing, I'll tell you that there are some ways of knowing that are not yet attained by me, but I heard about them as ways that the noble ones have, different ways of knowing that I've not come to, gain the realization or the experience to knowing that in that way. So in that case, I have confidence that if I continue practicing in the path, that some different ways of knowing may open up to me. But those ways that are different ways of knowing, I don't quite view them in terms of a higher reality and a conventional reality. I know that in the later Buddhism, and this came to be like developed more, that there's the idea that like the self, the anatta doctrine, about this essence of the soul, which is supposed to be supreme and sublime and blissful and eternal and self-created and so on. So, I mean, the Buddha actually had a skeptical approach to that teaching, and he would not affirm that. He said you can't find that self, but the conventional self, the one who gets out of bed and has breakfast and so on like that, it's very easy to find that self. It's the person you see in the mirror. But I don't necessarily think that that means that there's like different levels of reality. I think that maybe those two experiences, they're just pointing to different things. But to me, the way that I know something is when I know what to do about it. When I recognize it and I know what to do about it. So if I experience something and I recognize that this is the cause of dukkha, because of my training, I know what to do. Find out how to drop it. And I know that if I realize, if I have an experience saying, to some degree, at least on a momentary level, this dukkha is gone, then I know that the end of dukkha should be realized. So that is like what understanding is good, is the understanding that helps us to do the thing that we should do to come to the end of creating the kind of karma that's going to perpetuate dukkha and perpetuate going around and around in samsara. And so that's the kind of useful knowledge.
I say thank you. Yes, that really it gives me some clarity on the Four Noble Truths and the Dhammacakkappavattana, like what to do with all the different truths to know dukkha. Thank you. Yeah, that gives me some clarity.
And I see an answer to a comment saying, yes, you recognize that this is true. Yes. And now I'm going to call on Elaine, and then we'll go back to the sutta. But this is really good. It's good to reflect about that. And it depends on your personality. We're going to find this out later. How you know something's true or not is, in a way, like influenced by your personality. Elaine, what do you think?
It occurred to me that over the years, the way I feel I know if the teaching is true or not is by looking at the person that's delivering it. If they don't walk the talk, even in different types of Buddhism, I ran across like somebody okaying killing, and I thought, oops, this is not the teacher I want. So yeah, I think that gives us a basis for truth, right? Is this person, if we looked at our current affairs and that, is this person truly happy? Should I be following that person? Yeah, I'll cut it off there because I know time's an issue, but thank you.
Okay, let's go back to the sutta now. So, now he's talking about where these views come from. There are some ascetics who have the doctrine and view, some things are accept, some not. Okay, regarding this, the view of the ascetics and Brahmins, to whom everything is acceptable, is close to greed, bondage, approving, attachment, and grasping. The view of the ascetics and Brahmins, to whom nothing is acceptable, is far from greed, bondage, approving, attachment, and grasping. Now, this is a kind of a puzzling statement. I think we've seen it elsewhere, that a person who's like disappointed with the world, has an aversive tendency, might have an easier time to enter the Dhamma than a person who has a greedy tendency. Because the person with that aversive tendency already knows about dukkha. Okay? But when he said this, the wanderer Dīghanakha misunderstood him and thought that he was being affirmed. He said, "Oh, worthy Gautama commends my conviction. He recommends my conviction." Now, regarding the ascetics and Brahmins, to whom some things are acceptable and some things are not, here's the Buddha. Their view of what is acceptable is close to greed, bondage, approving, attaching, and grasping. Their view of what is not acceptable is far from greed, bondage, approving, attaching, and grasping. When it comes to the view of the ascetics and Brahmins to whom everything is acceptable, a sensible person reflects like this. I have the view that everything is acceptable. Suppose I were to obstinately stick to this view and insist this is the only truth, everything else is futile. Then I'd argue with two people, an ascetic or Brahmin to whom nothing is acceptable, and an ascetic or Brahmin to whom some things are acceptable and some things are not. When there's arguing, there's quarreling. When there's quarreling, there's distress. And when there's anguish, there's harm. So considering in themselves the potential for quarreling, arguing, quarreling, distress, and harm, they give up that view by not grasping another view. So here what the Buddha is, he kind of like fooled Dīghanakha by making him think that he'd affirmed his view, but actually he was saying like any view, if you cling to it, that leads to harm. So give up those wrong views by not grasping another view. That's how those views are given up and let go. And then he completes the case in the other two situations, so that if you think nothing is acceptable, and you stick to that view, and you're obstinate with that, then you've got two other people to quarrel with, and you're quarreling in that case. And then the one who thinks that some things are acceptable and some things not acceptable, this is like, I guess, actually, it's a kind of average person, isn't it? Like, if you just talk to a person on the street, and you may find that they totally believe in freedom, and they could care less about kindness. So it's like people latched onto some particular things that they're going to hold on to, and then the other things just, they don't even think about it, don't bother thinking. Or you could say, some people think that my religion is acceptable, and everything in my religion is acceptable, and everything in those other religions is not acceptable. So that's an example of a person who accepts some things and doesn't accept other things. So they use that accepting and not accepting in a way which is even the most quarrelsome position of all, because they're drawing such boundaries like that between themselves and other people. But the Buddha is developing that no matter which kind of view, if you're a skeptic, if you're dogmatic, or if you're selectively dogmatic and selectively skeptical, as long as you cling to those views, you come to quarreling, arguing, distress, and harm. So if you consider in yourself the potential for arguing, quarreling, distress, and harm, give up that view by not grasping another view. And now the Buddha gives a teaching. And this is really a teaching about the self. And it's while listening to this part of the talk that Sariputta gains his awakening. Agivesana, this body is formed. So it's been created. everything that's created arises from a cause. And when that cause ceases, it ceases from a cause. So this body is formed. It's made up of 4 principal states. That's the 4 great elements: earth, air, fire, and water. Produced by mother and father, built up from rice and porridge, liable to impermanence, to wearing away and erosion, to breaking up and destruction. You should see it as impermanent, suffering, disease, a boil, a dart, a misery, an affliction, alien, falling apart, empty, not self. In so doing, you'll give up desire, affection, and subservience to the body. So this is the kind of thinking that leads to coming to the end of grasping. I'm going to pause a second here and call on Richard.
Thank you, Raya. So a number of people quoted the Kalama Sutta, and it's generally thought of, okay, there's all these things which may or may not be reliable, and people kind of think along those terms. But after that, Buddha goes into describing, do you think greed is good or not good? Oh, it's not good, right? And then, so he goes through this list. Okay, so what about hate? You think hate is good or not good? Oh, it's not good, because he says you should understand those things to be true, right? That that you experience. And so he gives people these experiences. Everyone, yeah, greed's not good, hate's not good, delusion is not good. And then he goes into the first 4 oh, sorry, my brain just went off, but, principles, non-killing, non-stealing, non-rape, and non-lying.
Yeah.
And they agree, yeah, none of those things are good, right? So it's not that he just stops there and just leaves you hanging. Okay, now what do I do? Where do I go? He points out clearly, and then he points out after that the noble disciple, who is free to a certain extent of a lot of these things, right? He has a mind where he goes into the Brahma Viharas, and he's thinking only good things, and the 4 different Brahma Viharas for other beings and everything like that. So he's showing that superior state of mind, right? Once you adopt these basic ideas of what's good and bad, right? Then you free yourself up, and you only have goodwill and good wishes for others. And then he talks about various assurances you're assured for yourself. Well, even if there is another world, okay, you'll get along fine in this world. People will like you because you're always a good person, you're a kind person, you're a loving person. Generally speaking, there's always some evil person might attack a good person, but generally, the society as a whole, the good society as a whole, they'll want you to be a part of it. They'll want you to be a member of it. But if there is another world after this, well, obviously, you're going to go to a nice heavenly place, because you've qualified yourself to do so. And he explains all those things like that. So it's not that he just says, you can't have faith in this, you can't have faith in that, you can't have faith, because it may or may not be true. He then shows you, by your own experience. Don't you experience this? Yeah, that's true. Yeah, don't you experience? So that's how then where to make a stand. Now, this question with Dīghanakha that he doesn't see anything as acceptable. This may sound a little abstract, but it's kind of like the idea of nothingness, right? Now, we hear the word nothingness, and we think we know what nothingness is, right? We think we know, okay, there's a definition, right? But actually, true nothingness cannot be experienced. There's no such thing as true nothingness. Even complete emptiness, even if you believe in infinite space, empty of all things, right? That's not nothing. That's a something. So all these things that we see and experience in reality are somethings. Even if you enter into cessation is not nothing. That's a something. That's the mind, the Chaito, your own mind, entering into a state of cessation. But in certain sutras, like the one where Sariputta, Majjhima Nikaya 111, which is another way that it supposedly explains that Sariputta became enlightened, it says in there very clearly, he entered in all these states, right? He knew them while he was in there, and he knew them when he exited. So many people think that you enter into cessation and you have no conscious awareness. Actually, that's not true. People who have not developed to cessation through becoming a noble disciple, when they enter into that cessation, it's such an abstract condition for their mind that when they come out, they feel like, oh, there was nothing, because they're still very attached to being something. They haven't gone beyond that idea, even though they can get their mind into abstract states of meditation. And but in reality, there's no such thing as nothing, So, and you cannot conceive of nothing, because there is no such thing. You can conceive of an idea, a word, nothing, but even that word is something, it's always something. So, but
Yes.
that's kind of an abstract way
That's
of
very
looking at it.
true.
But anyway, thank you for
Even
listening to me.
what Dīghanakha meant by saying I accept nothing is a little bit mysterious. Even I listened to Bhikkhu Bodhi's talk, and he sort of was a little bit shrugging that it's not completely clear what it is. I do have the impression that it's more from a perspective of intellectualizing and sophistry, that he was saying I accept nothing, more so than from meditative experience. But it's possible, because it's not like fully explained. I'm going to come back to Corina now.
Oh, okay, thank you. That last part that you just read, reminded me, I was, the part, giving up desire and subservience to the body, and what that means. It's like it's kind of like that thought that I'm going to be okay if my body is okay. 2 days ago, my neck started hurting. And so bad that I went to the chiropractor, and they said, oh, it's not, your bones alignment are fine. And I know how to massage, and so I massaged, and it wasn't that either. It's a new kind of pain. I think it might be like it may be a disc issue. And I was like, uh-oh, I'm just getting over some things, and I've got this neck pain that's actually, it kind of hurts when I swallow. And I thought, okay, I'm at a point I could get upset about this and be like, oh, I'm just trading one thing for another kind of pain. Got over something else. And then I realized, of course I'm doing that. That's what the body does. That's kind of the story till the end of my life. It's going to be just trading one pain for another pain for another pain. And I'm really taking that phrase that you said, Ayasobana, I know something is true if I know what to do about it. I'm really liking that, because what that means to me is that it's really understanding cause and effect, how things work together. And so if the cause or the effect of seeing my body in a certain way and having subservience to my body, it's going to have the effect of being upset every time I'm in pain. And I don't want that. So I like that statement. Thank you.
So he goes on. He's talked about the body. Now comes feeling. There are three feelings: pleasant, painful, neutral. At a time when you feel a pleasant feeling, you don't feel a painful or neutral feeling. You only feel a pleasant feeling. At a time when you feel a painful feeling, you don't feel a pleasant or neutral feeling. You only feel a painful feeling. At a time when you feel a neutral feeling, you don't feel a pleasant or painful feeling. You only feel a neutral feeling. Pleasant, painful, and neutral feelings are impermanent, conditioned, dependently originated, liable to end, vanish, fade away, and cease. Seeing this, a learned noble disciple grows disillusioned with pleasant, painful, and neutral feelings. Being disillusioned, desire fades away. When desire fades away, they're freed. When they're freed, they know they're freed. This is really the fast track, isn't it? We don't even have to go through all 5 khandhas. We only got to go through 2 of them to come to the goal. Being disillusioned with Vedana. You know, I mean, in a certain kind of way, what I was saying about the truth, like you recognize something as true when you know what to do about it. But if you are driven by feeling, in a certain way, if you have a pleasant feeling, because of that feeling, you think you know what to do about it. You've got to get some more, or you've got to keep it because it's pleasant. Or if it's unpleasant, you've got to get rid of it. And so that's sort of like the false gold, and it's there is this kind of like a way of knowing things or knowing reality because you know through your feelings. But the Buddha is saying you'll be disappointed there because of the impermanence and unreliability of the feeling and how they're continuously changing and how you can only experience one of them at a time. And so then one becomes disillusioned. And then being disillusioned, desire fades away. By desire, that means viraga. That's called passion. When desire fades away, they're freed. When they're freed, they know they're freed. They understand rebirth is ended. The spiritual journey has been completed. What had to be done has been done. There is nothing further for this place. It is kind of like a radical it's not like this radical skepticism of a sophist who is not consulting his own direct experience, but is just in some kind of like intellectual way rejecting everything, saying it's impossible to know anything. But it's a different kind of not becoming, interrogating and becoming disillusioned and giving up the clinging and letting go. So that letting go is sort of like a distant relative to the mind of rejecting. So if I'm at Dīghanakha, I say, I reject everything. And I'm the Buddha, I say, I let go of everything. So we could ponder like, what's the difference with that? So this process that the Buddha is pointing to, looking at the real nature of things, how unsatisfactory they are if you cling to them, where they lead to if you cling to them, becoming disillusioned, giving up the clinging, giving up the craving, letting go, and then the result of that is not that you have to let go of one thing and grasp onto something else, but instead one can simply let go and then come to freedom. A mendicant whose mind is freed like this doesn't side with anyone or dispute with anyone. They use the language of the world to communicate without getting stuck on it. Now, at that time, Venerable Sariputta was standing behind the Buddha, fanning him. Then he thought, the Buddha speaks of giving up and letting go all these things through direct knowledge. Reflecting like this, Venerable Sariputta's mind was freed from the defilements by not grasping. The stainless, immaculate vision of Dhamma arose in the wanderer Dīghanakha. So Dīghanakha has his stream entry. He realizes everything that has a beginning has an end. Then Dīghanakha saw, attained, understood, and fathomed the Dhamma. He went beyond doubt, got rid of indecision, became self-assured and independent of others regarding the teacher's instruction. He said to the Buddha, "Excellent were the Gautama, excellent," as if he were writing the overturned or revealing the hidden or pointing out the path that was to the lost or lighting a lamp in the dark so people with clear eyes can see what's there. Worthy Gautama has made the teaching clear in many ways. I go for refuge to the worthy Gautama, to the teaching, to the mendicant Sangha. From this day forth, may the worthy Gautama remember me as a lay follower who has gone for refuge for life." So that's closing the story. We may just go back a little bit and understand this process of becoming disillusioned with the body and disillusioned with feeling, and how that letting go takes us to freedom. Richard, can you add something now?
Thank you. Yeah, the Buddha doesn't argue with Dīghanakha. He simply points that there's a flaw in his argument. And then there's 3 possible variations of those arguments. And he just points out that there's flaws in all 3. He doesn't argue with them. He doesn't say this one's right, that one's wrong, whatever. He just points that out. But he does add that someone who takes Dīghanakha's argument is closer to letting go. Because to take that argument is kind of like a letting go, because you've let go of thinking, things are good and everything like that. You're not sure what they are, but you're not placing a stand. Okay, I should be this way, I should act that way. And then he just gives practical examples of his teaching, not arguments. Just he says, okay, and he explains, the body, blah blah blah. It's got all these problems and everything. That's not fit to be thought of the self, is it? No. And then he points out the problem with sensations. Okay, they come and go. You can't really control the process too well. So that's just sort of a playing a loser's game. So it becomes dissatisfactory, right? And then he points out that if one reaches that true dissatisfaction, not Dīghanakha's idea that nothing's acceptable, but that true type of dissatisfaction, then the mind can, go to liberation, state of mind. It's actually Chitto. It's Vimukti Chitto, I think. Some of that are Vimukti Chitto. So it's one state of mind attains liberation, final liberation. So now Sariputta is very interesting here, because he's listening to the Buddha talking like this, and he gets an insight, which is the Buddha is not just describing something philosophically like, say, his previous teacher did. Okay, he had a philosophy and everything, which was more this ear wriggling. He couldn't really take a stand because there seems to be defects in all things, whatever style you take. He's talking from a position of realization. He gets that insight. Oh, he's not just saying, he's saying something he's actually experienced. And what is he saying? He's saying to just let go, of all those things. And he does the same thing. He just follows the Buddha's mind and he lets go of everything. And he attains Nibbāna.
Yeah.
But there's an interesting thing, which is this other sutra, 111. There's a different description in there where the Buddha describes one by one Sariputta mastered all the different states of mind. Knowingly he entered, knowing he was in it, knowing he was out of it, and he realized that they were just all volitionally produced conditioned states. And then he attained Nibbāna. It says over a 2-week period. But this is going to be very controversial, but I have a view of that sutta. Other than the 2-week period, it would be a 1-week period. That's what Mahamoggallana did. It was Mahamoggallana who went to all the states of mind and realized they were volitionally produced and came out. So I think that because Sariputta ultimately became like the most famous disciple, and the Buddha in that 111 says that he had his heart, his mind, you know, he was the disciple that had it, you know, and he may have made that comment, right? His original assessment of that, the week between Mahamoggallana's attainment, and even though the sutta comes much later, but and Sariputta's attainment, he just felt, oh wow, because if you notice, most of the arahants up to that point, this is a very condensed period in the first year of Buddha's teaching, they're all sort of becoming arahants by understanding. Okay, they're not doing so much the meditation. They're quickly just sort of perfecting it at some level or another just by understanding. Because all the stories, they're sitting there and Buddha is giving a talk of some kind, you know, what we now call a sutta. And in the middle of that talk, all of a sudden, oh yeah, it's like Sariputta here. Oh yeah, bang, you know, enough of that stuff. I'm out of here, you know. So I think maybe that's why the Buddha might have been talking about Mahamoggallana, because he was kind of like the first example you see in that early period who goes through all the same steps that the Buddha did. He follows that exact same path, and then he attains enlightenment. But anyways, that's just my view. Thank you
That's
very
a
much for listening.
very interesting theory. Indeed, Mahamoggallana was much more known for his psychic powers, for having the idis and so forth, and so that's matching with the pattern in Sutta 111. So we'll have to write to some forum somewhere and put out this theory and see how many people attack. I think what we can appreciate is, and I really appreciate, Richard, what you said about how the teaching of Sanjaya was actually not that as difficult to go from there to understanding the Buddha's teaching. And of course, Sariputta and Mahamoggallana also coming from the same school, and they also were able to very quickly understand and realize when they heard about dependent origination, they could see it in a snap. So this kind of, you know, I'm an intellectual, and I like to think about theories. I just the other day I was talking to somebody, and I said, "Oh, they really like it when Ayasavana just talks from her own experience, and they hate it when she talks about philosophy." And I said, "Oh no, this next talk that's coming along is going to be all about philosophy." So I apologize for the philosophy, but I do think that, you know, ultimately there's got to be a marriage of using our intelligence and thinking clearly, and also being in touch with our own inner experience, and depending on our experience, that tells us the value of things. Because you can't really, I mean, you could sort of figure it out intellectually what you think is good or bad, but you'd get a much better result if you can depend on experience to give you the value, and know where to go from there. Now I'm going to call on Ananaya. Talk. You're muted.
I'm the one who said that, but it's not the full extent of the content, which I did. I have an intellectual bent myself, but in what I was noting is that as time has gone on, that your talks have gotten fuller. So you're weaving in things in a way that I find very helpful, and I think it is helpful to others. and you know, the thing is too, is that what I notice, although my Kalyana and those that I've met along the way in my practices over the years, there seems to be a couple qualities that are consistent, and one is an inquiring mind, and what you mentioned earlier, which was something doesn't quite add up. But it is because a person is observant, they've had life experiences or whatever, and something just kind of isn't gelling. And so it does take, you do have to have a degree of intellect and critical thinking skills that go along with your, and evolve with your personal experiences in life. I think to be able to digest what the Buddha is talking, because on one level, yeah, you can take it very simplistically, but that's not. There's, you know, the farther along I get, the more deeper, you know, there are more deeper layers to this and whatnot. So anyway, but thank you for the talk.
Okay,
And Richard's point too.
you're welcome. Oh, okay.
Thank you, Aya. The Sariputta, how come he had to go through different steps? From my understanding, that there's like 11 stages of achieving enlightenment. And Sariputta had to go through all the 11 because of his role. So he can experience, he can explain to people. Other people don't have to do that. They can just go 1, 2, or just, you know, a few, and then they're able to. But Sariputta was required because of his role that he had to experience each of those. The other thing, when you talked about, you know, Sariputta is your favorite because he can easily explain what the Buddha's taught briefly, right? That reminds me of bhikkhunis as well. People have gone to bhikkhuni because they didn't understand the Buddha. He was just so brief. And the bhikkhuni, without listening to the Dhamma talk or to the Buddha's teaching, they gave explanation. And then at the end, the bhikkhuni would say, then go to the Buddha and confirm. And each time they would go on to the Buddha, and the Buddha said, oh, I would have answered the same thing. So it was not unique to just the Sariputta. It's also bhikkhunis as well. So I appreciate this subjects very much. Thank you, Aya.
I'll let Seminary Arya Dhammajivi have the last word. No, I'll let Aya Brahmavara have the last word. Would you like a last word?
One thing that just strikes me, I'm quite simple really, is just that, you know, Dīghanakha was intellectualizing. He was up in his head, and he was kind of on the right track, but he needed to come to the fullness of the experience of what being a human being is, which is that there's a body and there's feelings. And when he landed there, you know, things became very clear to him very quickly. And I just find that very beautiful and like a real encouragement to remember not to not to forget the body and not to forget feelings, and to be guided by our experience of embodiment.
Thank you so much. Very important observation. We can close by giving respect to the Triple Gem. Araham Samma Sambuddha Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi Savakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammam Namasami Subharipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sangham Namami. Thank you, everyone, for your patient listening today.
Thank you, Aya.
Ayaz. Thank you, Ayaz.